Hey, so a while ago, about a year, I was part of a Kickstarter funding campaign, um, and I got some Raging Heroes miniatures. Now, Raging Heroes is one of those many companies that does not technically Games Workshop miniatures, but clearly inspired by them. And they were doing a Kickstarter campaign. They did Dark Elves and I think they maybe called them Night Elves, and they did Sisters of the Eternal Mercy and Sisters of the Orphanage, which are the Sisters of Battle equivalent, basically. But they did fantasy and sci-fi versions of all the models. And like I said, I kickstarted that because Games Workshop, of course, no plastic Sisters of Battle. And at the time, we didn't know when or if ever we were going to get some of those again. So, we'll see how that goes. But, I'm not upset or anything. I got a pretty good price for these because I was part of the Kickstarter campaign. But I figured I would just give a review of these models. They're a bit different than the Games Workshop models. I mean, they'll still blend in with them on the table top, but yeah, there's some things to be aware of. I have some criticisms and some things I liked, things I didn't like, so I just wanted to talk a little bit about that with these models. And first of all, one thing to realize is I didn't get the sci-fi ones, the Sisters of Eternal Mercy. I got the Sisters of the Orphanage, which are actually the fantasy models, which may seem kind of weird since I wanted to use them as Sisters of Battle in 40K. But I actually liked these models. I liked their helmets better. I kind of liked the arms better. I thought that the backpacks and the art that they had of the sci-fi models looked kind of funny. So for a number of reasons, all just basically coming down to I like the look of these models better. I decided to go with the fantasy version of the Sisters of the Orphanage is what they're called. And when I got them in the box, well, you'll notice a couple of things with these pictures and I've taken. First of all, the plastic is a lot less consistent, I feel like, than Games Workshop. I have seen, Games Workshop kits, plastic kits, where the plastic is, different, kind of a different color. But, right here we hold these two sprues up. One's a lot darker than the other, obviously, if you look at this picture. And like I said, you get that in Games Workshop a little, but it's generally over like a long period of time. Like if you get one sprue that was made like a long time before another one, you can notice a distinctly different color to the plastic. These ones, it's all part of the same package that was shipped to me at the same time. I think maybe that just comes from it being a smaller company. There just seems to be less consistent of a recipe for the plastic that they use. The plastic is decent quality. I feel like maybe the darker one is a little more brittle, a little harder and a little more brittle. I'm not exactly sure of that though. They're both pretty similar in texture. And these all have ball joints, which is kind of cool. They give you a lot more posability. I like that. And the detail's pretty good on these models, obviously. If you do a little size comparison, you'll notice that they're a little more kind of slender than the Games Workshop models. Games Workshop models, their pieces look more bulky, so these don't necessarily match the best with them. You've got to be really selective with which parts you swap out. There's some parts you can get away with, and some it just looks freakishly big and weird. Head swaps I don't think will work well. The more modern Games Workshop models, some of them may work a little better with these, just because I think that they have kind of downsized things a little too, whereas they were kind of bulky and fat looking is the best word I can come up with when you pair them with the Raging Heroes miniatures. Otherwise, there are still some things you can use. You can use some guns. You can use some accessories that aren't too oversized. Now, like I said, I like the ball joints. I like the posability, but I do have some fairly serious criticisms of these kits. One big one, I had a real problem with the ankles snapping off. I've got a couple of pictures showing that. There tends to be more flashing on these. And there tends to be some fairly thick flashing in like the loincloth or tabard or whatever you want to call it that's hanging down between the legs. There tends to be some fairly thick flashing in between that and the base. It's kind of difficult to cut off, and when you put too much pressure on that, the ankles, which are really thin, can snap, which is not a good thing. The good news is they seem to glue back on fairly easily, fairly. They seem to make a pretty good bond when they glued back on. Go back together pretty well, but yeah, not wild about that. Like I said, there tends to be more flashing on these, I feel like, than the Games Workshop models. Or do they take a little bit more cleaning up? I guess you could say they're a little less beginner friendly for modeling that way. Generally, it's not a huge big deal. These ones had some almost like paper thin flashing that needed to be cleaned off around the edges, which is kind of weird. Another problem that I thought was pretty big, this hammer, if you look at it, was warped, and when I tried to straighten it out, the handle just broke. Now fortunately, I was planning on cutting up a lot of these hammers anyway to reposition the arms so that they could hold guns, bolters, melt-a-guns, that sort of thing, and this one I made into a melt-a-gun holder. So I didn't use that hammer, so you know, it was just kind of a minor setback. But if I was planning on using these exactly as they came in the box, I would be fairly upset with that, because it was really, you know, curved, bent, kind of warped in a very noticeable way that you couldn't really use, and when I tried to straighten it out, it snapped. So that's not good. Yeah, most of them I did not have that problem though. There's not a ton of warping. Mostly it's just, you know, some flashing you need to clear. And let me show you what I did as far as the conversion so far. Here's a couple of the spell blades, some kind of blade sisters, blade maidens, I think they're called. That's what it is. That I just cut off the end of the sword and added chainsword end. I think they make pretty good Repentia. Right there, the current Sisters of Battle Repentia models I think are pretty dang ugly. So these are a little better, certainly, in my opinion. And here's the standard Battle Sister I modified with the melt-a-gun, as you can see. Melt-a-gun is almost bordering on too big, I feel like, but it works. It is a little bulky though. You can see how they get a little bulky there. Those are the conversions that I've made so far. They seem to be coming together fairly well. I'll probably do another video showing them when I've completed everything in this set. But yeah, that's just kind of my review of the Raging Heroes product line. Overall, it's pretty decent. Now, I do know that they tend to have a lot of female models that are kind of provocative to the point where it can be kind of goofy sometimes, I feel like. These ones aren't as bad because they're full armor, but you know, it all depends on if that's to your taste. But I think it can look kind of goofy sometimes. But the detail on their models is pretty good. They've got the ball joints, so it's lots of posability. That's the good side. On the downside, like I said, there was a little bit of warping and a little bit of, you know, easily broken parts on models, and not a big fan of that, obviously. So I guess this is kind of a middle of the road review. This is my first time ever building any models from this company. So there you go. Make your decision whether that looks like something you'd want or not.